Millions of children are educated every day in a myriad of settings. Homeschool, public school, private school, charter schools, online academies, learning pods, private tutoring, and more. Why are so many families transitioning to homeschooling? What advantages have they found? What unique challenges do they face? What have they learned, and how can listening to their experiences support your child's education? These are their stories. Together, we learn. This is the Edvantage. Hello, fellow educators, and thank you for listening. I'm Todd Michael, creator and host of the Edvantage. Today's guests are Nick and Ashley Taylor. The Taylors are a second-generation neurodivergent homeschool family living in East Texas with their 3 children, ages 7, 6, and 4, and are in their 3rd year of homeschooling. Nick and Ashley met in fencing class at Texas State University, where Ashley graduated with a BFA in Fine Arts and Nick graduated with a liberal arts degree in creative writing. Nick works full-time from home as a programmer, and they've been married for 9 years, during which time they have lived in several parts of Texas. In this interview, we talk neurodivergence and education, the ways homeschooling can offer significantly more flexibility than traditional educational settings, and some of the ways public education is not equipped to meet the needs of neurodivergent children. Nick and Ashley share their unique perspectives as they speak both from their experiences as students and as parents. This is a conversation I have looked forward to sharing with you for a long time, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. All right, Ashley and Nick, welcome to the Edvantage. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having us, Todd.
So you are now officially my second couple that I'm interviewing together, and I really enjoyed the first time, so I know we're going to have a lot of fun. And I think what's nice about interviewing at the same time is we get a lot more richness to the homeschooling experience. I think a lot of families have assumptions about what homeschooling's like, or the involvement from the parents that are mostly with the kids versus the parent that maybe is working from home or working outside the home. And it's really cool to hear both sides at the same time, because I'll interview a husband or I'll interview a wife, and the homeschool mom, homeschool dad roles often look different. And so I'm excited to get into that. Before we talk about your actual homeschooling of your children, though, I'd like to hear a little bit about each of your own backgrounds, because you have a superpower in both being second generation homeschool. Yeah. So I don't care who goes first, you can decide that, but let us know a little bit about what your education was like, the pros, the cons, the challenges, things like that.
I'll go first.
Cool.
So the homeschool was not originally the plan for my mom. She was a high-powered nurse. My dad was doing his thing, and they wanted to just keep doing that, and we were going to be in public school. But pretty quickly, they discovered that I have some extra talents, and that included a lot of chatting and ending up in the principal's office every day. So, long story short, they found out that I'm ADHD, dysgraphic, dyscalculate, and later, in the last couple of years, I've discovered that I'm autistic. So they ended up pulling me out halftime. I'm not quite sure if it has a specific name, but there's a specific type of school where you use their curriculum and you're there every other day, and you're homeschooled the other days. Mm-hmm. And then eventually she phased that all the way out and went full-time homeschool, figured it all out, started making her own curriculum and stuff, because back then she didn't have the internet or community people to really do anything for her. So she did it. She did the thing. And so then I graduated high school all the way through homeschool, and then went on to college and graduated with honors and a BFA. And I was recently talking to Steve Demi from MacUC, and he said I wasn't supposed to, all of my diagnoses wasn't supposed to allow me to even graduate high school.
Right.
So homeschool really empowered me to go the distance, really gave me those resources to get all the way there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My turn. Mine's actually a little similar. I did go to school through I think it was 5th grade, maybe 6th. just kind of normal stuff. But I had some kind of behavioral things as well that were kind of related to my brother and some other things. But um, my mom had me just in regular public school, but then we moved to Central Texas, and the area we moved to, my mom looked at the schools there and they were pretty bad. And she was already kind of thinking about homeschool just as a way to give me a better environment. And so seeing that the school district was pretty bad where we were, she was like, okay, now's a good chance.
Sure.
So for me, it was kind of weird. I was like, wait, I'm not going to go to school anymore, but I'm still going to do school. So, but it was really good for me because that way I was able to kind of avoid some of the situations I was getting in trouble with. And, it helped me to, it was just kind of like my mom, same as her mom, like there wasn't really a thing. Like I'm pretty sure for a while I was the only person I knew that was homeschooled.
Right.
And we did end up finding some community and some little classes and things and other kids that were doing homeschooling, but I didn't, it was kind of like even to the point where my mom would say, hey, if there's a policeman and they come to you and they ask why you're not in school, you need to tell them that you're home, She was like worried about that.
Remember those conversations.
I am homeschooled. Here is proof.
I had to like make it up on the spot. So
yeah.
That never
That's
happened.
So funny.
I always, every time I went out, I was like looking for them. Like, they're gonna get me. They never actually
It's
did,
2 p.m. What do you think you're doing out in public? Right.
You're not allowed.
I mean, I was never by myself, so it was like, are they? Yeah, but anyway, it was good. And I think one thing that was cool is it helped me in my career. I'm kind of a self-taught developer, so being at homeschooled and my mom kind of just was like, here's some curriculum, just do it, and then I could get help if I needed, but I pretty much went through it myself, and so I really learned good skills of learning on my own and figuring things out and gaining knowledge of my own. So yeah.
You mean you're able to learn without someone telling you exactly what to do? Inconceivable.
He wants to learn.
Yeah.
He wants it.
Right. So I love the parallels in each of your origin stories and kind of the way that this inertia was already going forward in each of your lives of realizing the positives of homeschooling. I'm curious, and you could either, one of you can answer for both of you, or you can each answer, but was there ever a point where when you were homeschooled during that time, when you thought ahead to, hey, if I ever have kids, I for sure want to homeschool, or was that even a consideration at the time?
Well, in high school, I swore that I was not going to get married or have kids.
Okay.
Because why would I do this to myself?
Right.
I saw the selflessness that my parents did, and I was like, but that's not for me. That's for you to handle.
Right.
And the Lord is very, very humorous. And even before I met him, I had quickly realized I wanted a family and we were most likely going to end up homeschooling. So before we even met, that was already in the back of my mind that, oh, this is actually a very good thing. Like, I feel like college hit and I was like, oh, this was actually a really good thing.
Right.
This is actually really great.
Yeah.
The transition was so smooth for me. I feel like most parents are really scared about the transition into college. But for me, it was so smooth. And I had to work hard to get low grades. Like I had to really try to not
right.
invest in a class because I wanted to know everything. I barely tried in classes and got 92s. It was almost simple compared to how homeschool high school was for me.
Yeah. So I was like, I gotta get a wife, gotta get a woman, gotta do this. And then when I met her and we were, dating for a while and I was starting to think that she was the one, I was like, oh yeah, kids, I guess I want kids. So I really hadn't even thought about kids until I was almost married. And then, so yeah, but what's interesting is when we I talked about kids, and I was, on that track, and I think we were probably married, but I was curious. I was like, I couldn't really imagine not homeschooling our kids. I was like, it was such a great thing for me, and I see so much brokenness in public schools. I was like, I really want that. But I was also thinking, but it's not something I'm going to have the lion's share of. So I wanted to make sure that she was okay with it. So it was more like I hope that she wants that too,
Mm-hmm.
because I really want that for my kids. But I wasn't going to be like, no, our kids have to be homeschooled. You have to do this.
Right.
If she wasn't ready or willing or didn't feel capable, then I wasn't going to force her. But I definitely was like, when I started actually thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I definitely want my kids to be homeschooled.
Right. You saw the pros there. You know, Ashley,
Yeah.
you mentioned something that I think is underappreciated for those who haven't either sent a homeschool child to college or experienced it themselves. And it's that hunger for learning and that connection with learning that is
Yeah.
really so well preserved with homeschoolers that makes college so fun and so exciting. And I always joke, like, I started college younger than most anybody I know, but I also stayed there longer than anybody I know. And it was because I loved it. So, like, I started taking classes at 15, started going full time at 17, and you would think that story would end with, and I got my BA at 20, or, I was there forever. And it wasn't because I was struggling, it was because I was thriving and loving learning. And for a while, I didn't even want to have to pick a major because I was just enjoying every class I could
Yes.
take, taking as many classes as they would let me. And it was because it was learning. It was interesting. It was fun. Never was there a moment where I thought, man, I have to get all of these requirements so that I can get a degree, so I can get a job. It was always, I want to learn about that. I want to learn about that. I want to learn about that. And that's not to say that can't happen with people who go through a traditional public setting. But so often, by the time you've gone through middle school and high school, I see so often people just start to associate schooling with learning, and because schooling really sucks the life out of them, they get really leery of anything that has to do with learning, and so they just kind of
Right.
shut off to all of it. And when they get to college, it's almost like, okay, how quickly can I get out of here and get on with the rest of my life?
Yeah, yeah. I think that it really is underlined in what is the purpose for which you're learning? Are you learning because your kid can't get enough about dinosaurs? Oh my gosh, we are on a dinosaur kick with one of our kids, and we thought he was out of this phase, and he is just, 3, 4, 5, he's 6 now, and he is still like goes bananas over a no dinosaur, because we have every dinosaur book.
Right.
The new one, they made another. Are you kidding? There's even more information, and he can name dinosaurs and he can tell you all these crazy facts, like the size of their brain compared to a human's. And he's 6. And the homeschool allows for a deep dive into that passion. And when it fades, or if it fades, he could be a paleontologist one day, who knows? But if it fades, then and he moves on to another subject, then we can go that way. But through that, we're
Right.
learning our map. How many dinosaurs are there on this map versus this? Like, you can wrap all of his education around his special interests.
Amen.
And with public schools in general, there are a few good ones, and there's amazing teachers out there. But generally, public school is to teach to the test so that the school can get funding.
Right.
And that's not going to turn out lifelong learners.
And it's even a matter of, the time is the most valuable resource in any teacher's toolbox. And it's a simple question of math, right? If you have your own children and from sun up to sundown versus if you have 30 children or 25 children and you have from sun up till, 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, it doesn't divide the same way. And so even if you love your students and you want them to dig deep and you would love to let them study dinosaurs for as long as they want, ultimately you only get a little sliver of the day that you can devote to each individual student as a classroom teacher. And then the other layer on that is you're told what you have to cover. And so there's scope and sequences. There's so many state laws and requirements and regulations around what is covered. And, when I was a classroom teacher, I would have loved to let my students pursue what was interesting to them, but I also would have been a quote unquote bad teacher for doing it, right? So it's like that
Yes.
catch 22.
Yes.
To be a quality educator, you technically would have been a bad teacher. And in homeschool, you remove all those, outside influences, and it is about what is interesting to your kid. And you highlight something so important there, though. You don't just say, well, you want to learn about dinosaurs, now just go play with some dinosaurs that we're going to call it good. You use that as the entry point for math and for history and for science and so many other things. And that can happen with any subject. Like find the kid's interest, you move forward with that, and you fold in what they need to learn.
Yes.
Now, I'm curious to hear a little bit about this kind of transition. So we've got Nick, who's kind of like, okay, I want a woman. Oh, with a woman, some kids might come. Okay, let's maybe homeschool these kids. I'm oversimplifying. I'm just joking.
Sure.
But you didn't have like this
That's pretty right.
You didn't have this longitudinal like goal of like, I have to homeschool kids and I'm gonna have this many kids. I'm curious, at what point did y'all decide like, oh, now we're having kids and now we're really gonna decide like we're homeschooling them? And what were those conversations like? What was that process like? And how did you kind of really go all in? Yes, this is what's happening for our family.
Well, I would say, and this may go back a little bit to what we were just talking about, but I actually really hated school. Like even homeschooling, I didn't really want to do the work. And I didn't like college very much. Like I got out of college as fast as I humanly could. But that was because, realizing now as an adult, I realized it was because I really wasn't interested in the things that I was doing. I have a degree in creative writing, but I'm a developer. And so I basically never use my degree.
Sure.
I mean, there's aspects I do, but for the most part, I don't have a computer science degree. And that's because I had no clue what I wanted to do in college. And I struggled with that. And so I just kind of did something that was easy, which was creative writing, and got through it. But I think looking back, I realized like if I had known where I wanted to be, where I am now, I would have loved to have a computer science degree. That would have been great. I could have taken so many cool classes that, are inconsequential now, but then I could, and I probably would have loved college and school. And so to that, like figuring out what they like and what works for them is paramount. And like college was easy. Like I didn't struggle with it. I didn't get great grades, but just because I didn't care.
Right. Yeah, that wasn't the goal. Sure.
Yeah, like I didn't care about it. I thought, employers don't look at your GPA. So as long as I pass and get that piece of paper, then I'm fine. And, I ended up doing okay just because like as a believer, whenever I do work, I do it. I can't help but do it as well as I can. And so, I think I had like a 3.4, 3.5, which for someone who didn't put much effort
3.2.
No. I think it was higher than that.
We'll have to have some fact checkers review this episode.
Let me go get the PDF of my transcript.
It drove me crazy. So I was like, you were so smart and you were not letting anyone know.
But anyway, so that's a big thing. But as far as like homeschooling our kids, I think, like I said, like when I was thinking about before we had kids and we were thinking about it, and I don't even remember if we talked specifically about school, but it just kind of like came across, and you said something, I think, that made me go, okay, she wants to homeschool. Like she's okay with it. Sure, there's going to be some challenges and things to figure out, and what does this look like logistically, and it'd be nervous about it and all that, but I could tell she was like, if we can homeschool, I want to homeschool. And so that it never really was a thought of like, well, which one should we pick? It just kind of was like, yeah, we're going to homeschool. Like,
right.
And I would say, I feel like you knew that since I was homeschooled that I was okay with that. I wouldn't be like, what are you talking about? No, we can't do that. That I'd be fine with that too. So.
Right.
So we met in his last semester in college, my last year in college in fencing class. And about 10 months later, we were married.
Yeah, it didn't.
Wow.
It wasn't very long. I think we had 5 months
Yeah.
dating and 5 months to plan the wedding.
Sure.
And we knew that we wanted to have kids really fast because we were both neurodivergent. We had troubles in school, and we wanted to have the energy that was going to be required to have a family that you have a 91% chance of passing it on. So
Sure.
we wanted to be able to be there and be all in. So we
Yeah.
had our family, boom, 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 3 in a row within 4 years. After we had a year, I think, as a single married couple.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 2 years, but it was still.
It was really
Like,
short
yeah, it was
compared
really-
to most people.
And
Right.
I don't say that I regret it, but it would have been nice to have a few more years. But again, we were like, I didn't want to be, an old man who couldn't keep up with his kids when they were, running around
When
as
they need you,
teenagers.
when they need you to be all in.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we were going to have neurodivergent kids, and looking at the public school systems in our area, or even as general, I was put in a handicap kid class when they discovered I was ADHD in the 3rd grade. They just couldn't handle it. They didn't have the resources, and the teachers were so overwhelmed, they just couldn't handle it. So I was given to them, and I got to color pages all day. And we didn't want that, or any form of that, or even a measure of, not even that close, not even this close to it. For our kids, we wanted them to see this as their superpower, because it's a superpower when it's harnessed and refined and given shape and form. They're some of the most intelligent people on the planet who do not think like most people.
Right.
And we wanted them to see that and not doubt it and not think less of that. And so I think that whole the conversation of kids turned almost immediately into, okay, yeah, we're expecting this. This is just part of the bundle, and we'll be all in.
Right.
Yeah. Another part for me, I think one of the biggest driving factors for me was not wanting my kids to necessarily, in their early years when they're learning so much and absorbing things and observing and all of that, to be around some of the corruption that's in school. Even the kids themselves that are, certainly not to say that I don't ever want my kids around non-believers, but I felt like at those early days, they needed a little more shelter and protection from the world. And I wanted them to, I didn't want them to come home with all this terrible philosophy or ideas that were
too soon.
Obviously not Christian. And then I have to slog through that of no, let me help you understand how that's, I didn't feel like when they're young that was a place to be. Let's get their spiritual foundation in place first.
Right.
And then I hope that they can go out into difficult areas and be a light.
Sure.
But let's get there first.
Yeah.
So many great principles you've both highlighted there. I think one that is, we're going to dig more into neurodivergence, because that is, don't get me started with public school and neurodivergent kids. Yes, we're gonna loop back to that. But on the topic of really recognizing that if you're going to have children, and thinking about what the best environment is and what their needs are going to be, and the pros of homeschooling, that ability to teach your kids your values and to base your time with them on what matters most to your family is so crucial. And every once in a while I'll get this, troll on Twitter or somebody kind of pop into the comments of a reel on Instagram or something and kind of jump on this bandwagon of you're just trying to indoctrinate your kids. And every time I'm I definitely am.
Exactly
and so
what I'm doing, so someone else won't do that.
Right. And so is
they will.
Yeah. The only difference between you and me is you believe I should indoctrinate them with something different than what I believe in. But nobody believes that every kid should be given this objective, clean slate of zero influence and zero values from their family. Of course your family is going to pass that on. That's the whole reason why we have cultures and why we have different societies that have risen and fallen, is because every child learns from the people around them. Now, the piece that is most baffling to me is when in those same conversations sometimes they will say, well, you are going to pass on your religious bias, and that's bad because you're going to make your child religious. Which, what's inherent in that opinion? A bias against religion, right? A secular bias. So I say be as unapologetic as you can. And this goes for, I mean, like, I would say the same thing to an atheist family who wants to raise their children according to their beliefs. Like, it doesn't matter the belief, but if one of your values is to pass on what you value, then yes, be unapologetic about that. And I love that you guys exemplify that so well, because I think too often people get a little timid when they get that pushback and they're like, well, I'm not trying to brainwash my kid. It's like, no, you're not brainwashing, but you are passing something on that you value. If you didn't value it, you wouldn't believe it yourself.
Sure. Yeah, well, and that's a good way to put it. If you don't value it, I mean, if you aren't passing it on, then you don't value it. You don't really care. And, that's Christianity, the most important thing in our lives. So yeah, like, of course we're going to pass that on. And we're not trying to turn them into mini versions of us.
Sure.
I'm not trying to turn my sons into mini versions of me, but I'm trying to give them the most important thing in their lives, and that foundation of Christianity. That there's your foundation. Let your personality and your life and your choices build on top of that. And I look forward to seeing how unique and different they are than mine. And
right.
Like, my oldest is a carbon copy of me so far away.
no part in making that child. It's copy paste.
Right. And so, like, I actually catch myself sometimes being like, okay, wait, he's not you. He's different.
Right.
There's some prediction there, but like, no, I'm going to give him the same foundation so that he can build upon something solid instead of something that's going to crumble away, or that, will lead him off somewhere that isn't good for him.
Yeah.
You can't raise your kids in a vacuum. You're going to influence them somehow, and
right.
you will pass on more than what you want to pass on. You'll pass on trauma. You can't have
Sure.
a childhood without some hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And coming to that realization as, you have these little babies, you're like, oh, what did I do? But you move forward with, you show them who doesn't do that to them, who can't do that to them, because he is good. He is light. He can't pass on trauma to you. He can't do these things.
Right.
And so we don't give them the foundation of us. We give them the foundation of the truth. And then everything can build from there. Their personalities can shine through that, with that.
That's a great way to put it. I now want to go back and continue the soapboxing about neurodivergence and public education, and not
Let's do that.
and not to just rail on public education, but let me just give a few of my things that I've observed in my previous career working in public education. So all too often I would see students similar to what you described as your experience, who would have very unique and different needs. And those needs would not, first of all, not be identified. And, the general policy in most school districts is before second grade, we won't even assess, we won't even consider if there are any special needs, anything present, because all kindergartners, all first graders, and many second graders develop at different levels. They have different needs. And what may be presenting as a need could simply just be a developmental, natural delay or something that's just unique to their age, right? So there's kind of this threshold from the very beginning of before second grade, like, we aren't even allowed to talk about it. And so you'll see kids with clear displays of being on the autism spectrum, or clear displays of having ADHD, or whatever it may be. But as a school, you're really not allowed to do much about it. You see it, the teacher sees it, the teacher struggles with it, parents see it, parents struggle with it, but we can't talk about it, right? We don't talk about Bruno. Then we get past to third grade and beyond, and they'll start considering assessing. But then it becomes this resources game of, okay, we've got 40 kids on our list that we're considering or that we're watching that may or may not need some assessment. We've got a school psych who is shared between multiple schools. We've got a resource teacher that already has a full classroom. Okay, we can maybe assess like 2-3 kids to try to figure out this year. So who's our highest need, right? So the kid who can kind of roll with it and get along usually falls through the cracks. The kid who's like throwing chairs and running off campus, oh man, I guess we better get that kid assessed, right? So now we've created an even bigger gap. First of all, all of these kids haven't even gotten any attention for the first several years or the first 3 years. Then we start to say, oh, only the ones that have the most extreme behaviors we're going to give the most immediate attention to. So then that kicks the can down the road maybe even further. Now we've got fifth graders who still have never been assessed, who every teacher says the same comments, has the same concerns, observes the same struggles for that student, but nothing has yet been identified. And then at the end of that, and again, I'm sorry to soapbox, but this is just what I had to walk away from the system. Then once they're identified, what is the solution? We're going to take everybody, no matter what the concern is, whether it's ADHD, whether it's anxiety, whether it's they're on the spectrum, whatever it is, we're going to toss them all with the same teacher for a chunk of the day. And during that time, they're missing whatever they would have been learning in their homeroom. And they could just kind of, I don't know, they'll catch up, whatever. But with that teacher, they're all together and they're all kind of getting a broken down, watered down version of what they would be learning. So now what's the result? Here's this kid who's had 5-6 years of public education that didn't work for them because of their unique needs. Now not only are they not really getting a fully adapted education, but the little bit that's adapted is at the expense of what they should be learning at their level. So now you're missing out on your 5th grade material so you can review 2nd grade. And that gap just widens and widens and widens. And so a kid who in a homeschool setting, you could just say, hey, this is where you're at. Great. Let's get you to the next step. Yeah, let's start there and move forward. That kid is every day beat into them. Yeah, here's your peers. And here you are. There's your peers a little higher. You're still here. Yep, your peers are way up here now. And sorry, you're here still. Oh, maybe you went a little up. Okay, yeah, you're up there. And I just see that kill that confidence and that love of learning and that excitement in those kids who, as you so well said, are brilliant, are absolutely brilliant, without exception, have unique gifts and talents and abilities that when they can develop them, they're amazing. But all they see is that disconnect.
Yeah, I think, like, one thing I told her when we were dating, she'd be like, man, I'm jealous of your intelligence. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, and she'd say, well, I'm not intelligent. I'm not smart. And I'd say,
a lot.
what are you talking about? Of course you're. Like, you're a brilliant artist. And like, now that, in my work, I like come to her for ideas and I'm just like blown away by, and I'm just like, it's just different. It's just over here. I'm over here. You're over here.
Right.
These are equal playing ground. Like, no, this one isn't better than that one. And in fact, if we all had the same brain, then there'd be so many things we couldn't get done because nobody knows this over here. Like, you got to have the diversity. And so, like, I think that's really cool to have people that are learning really differently or that are picking things up. And, like you were both just saying, like, once you get them figured out on, like, this is how you learn or where you need to be, you're like, holy cow, this kid is a genius. Like, I couldn't see that with this thing, but now this is incredible. So, yeah.
I was the guinea pig. I'm the oldest. And so I have 2 younger brothers, 5 and 10 years younger than me. And so they didn't have to do the whole gamut that I did. They are both now electrical engineers in this huge company, making, testing, doing things like with clearance. They have security clearances and stuff.
I can't tell you, I'm going to have to kill you type stuff.
And they would have never been able to do that if, like, my middle brother worked through math books, just through them. and he didn't have to stay at the same pace that would have been set by a classroom.
Yes.
He was able to put like 2 books in 1 year, while I'm over there, not doing the math because
Yeah.
that's for him, not me. But both of them are just amazing at what they do. And I think that would have been stifled because I'm very high functioning. My youngest is not as high functioning as I am, still very high functioning, but I think public school would have chewed him up and spat him out.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a sweet, tender soul and loves what he loves and doesn't like what he doesn't like, and is not really willing to do what he doesn't like. So He got to really specialize and really focus in and drive what he liked and what he did. And my mom was very good about rounding out his education too, but he just got to go. She said, "Here it is," and they went.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting, and I feel like you guys got me started on public education. I try so hard to not just rail, but it is limiting, especially for this particular topic with kids that have these needs that don't fit with the structure that public school superimposes. But what's so interesting is public education, what's kind of the number one factor in success for a kid, and it's the ability to pick up on social cues and conform, right? So like if you're able to pick up on the social cues of what we do in the classroom and kind of what the teacher wants and conform to that, teacher's happy with you. If you're able to pick up on social cues with your peers and do kind of the things that they do in free time, in between class, on the playground, at lunch, whatever, and conform to that, you're good to go. You're accepted. And then you get out of this superimposed setting and into the real world. And what is the number one factor in being kind of a loser or not really accomplishing anything? Is just settling for conformity and doing what everybody else is doing. And who do we hold up as brilliant and innovative and inspiring and record shattering, and the list goes on? People who break the mold, who don't conform, who think outside the box. And on so many job interviews or job descriptions, you see looking for creative problem solvers. And yet we're not fostering that. Yeah. Where did you get a chance to creatively problem solve? Most public school settings, people aren't getting it, right? So for me, I'm like, you look at those, they call them like 21st century skills sometimes in a school district, and they'll have them written up on posters around the wall. But what's actually happening doesn't reflect that. And so I look at, again, going back to homeschool, and not to just say the negative of public, but the pro and the advantage of homeschooling is you now have this environment where you can foster that type of learning that you just described with your brothers. It's like, you want to go narrow and deep and you have a passion for this, here is your time back. We're not stealing 6.5 hours of your day. Here's your time back to invest in that. And so by the time you get to what would be high school, you've already invested all this. And then, your kid can do internships. They can start to get part-time jobs. They can do so many things because they have that flexibility, versus if it's just like, bide your time. Now you've gotten to college, you can actually study what you want to.
Quick, you have to decide what you want to do the rest of your life.
Yes! And then like Nick, you're like, I don't know, I'll do this. And I was the same way. So I majored in music. Similar type of thought. Well, comes fairly natural, so I'll just do something and get a degree, because with a degree I could like manage a store or something. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so there it was. And then it wasn't until the end of that degree that I realized, oh shoot, like by that point I was married and I wanted to have kids. I was like, I'm gonna have to pay bills and stuff. I guess I need to figure out something to do.
What?
Yeah.
I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, that process of like, decide what you want to do and be and represent for the rest of your life, that's just not realistic either. Yeah.
No. We have some friends that are Chinese missionaries, and there's a saying while they were there. Do you remember how it went exactly? This is not perfect, but the nail out of place will be pounded into submission, into, basically it was like, if you stuck out, they'd take care of that and pound you into place.
Yeah.
And I feel like more and more, with the best of intentions, But with no resources, public school system is working its way toward, well, we have no ability, no people, no attention, no resources, no time
Mm-hmm.
to allow for any divergence of any sort. So we have to make sure everyone can fit into this rut, because it's
Right.
we know how to do this one trick and that's it.
Yeah.
Well,
And for the sake of
one way
management.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One way I see it is that I really believe that people kind of specialize. Like, people are really good at something. Everybody's good at something.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people who are good at a lot of things. And sometimes I think those people are like Steve Jobs, or, someone who is really artistic and really technically talented and really great business person. And those people go a long way. But most people have something they're really good at. And I think it's definitely very valuable to be well-rounded, but I feel like that's all the public school wants, is just, I'm going to teach you a little bit about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas, like, giving your child way more time for engineering than you do for writing or art, it's like, yeah, you're kind of helping them be better at science than you are at art. But are they really ever, they're not going to be an artist. Yeah, they need to know art. It's really valuable. It's really important. It's really cool. Let's immerse them in it. But, like, are they going to grow up to be an artist? No, they're going to grow up to be a scientist. So let's, like, focus our time and energy and effort into the thing that we know that they're going to become.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you just can't get anywhere else.
Right. Our daughter, she's 4. Straight out of the gate, this girl is the most incredible artist. She has an incredible dexterity just with her ability to do things are beyond, like, I've looked up, like, okay, average art skills for a 3-year-old. And, like, comparing her art with what is average is she's usually a full year ahead. And she wants it. She begs and begs and begs. So we just keep furnishing her with more and more stuff, as much stuff as she can handle. She has her own art easel now. She spends an hour every day outside painting. She knows words like in plain air. She knows what contemporary art is. I didn't teach her these things. This is stuff that she has picked up from all of these resources we keep throwing at her. And it's what drives her. It's what she eats and breathes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's like, okay, she needs to know science. She needs to know math and some of the things that will probably bore her to death, or will even maybe be hard for her. Mm-hmm. But, like, let's keep focusing on the art, because that's where she's at.
Right. We set aside huge amounts of time for her to just be in her element, and then we'll cap it off with a little bit of extra school time. You have to know how to read to sell your paintings. Mm-hmm. So
sure.
Yeah.
But that motivation is there, right? Like, you get that hook on what is already a passion, and that is what fuels the learning, rather than kind of trying to, damp that down. And, oh, well, I don't think you need to spend so much time on that. Here's what you really need to learn, and then you're already just butting heads from the start. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to hear a little bit about, because I know that every home is different in terms of who has time to work with the kids in their learning. Every home is different in the approach that they even have, right? Where all the way from, there's unschooling, where it's more child-led and very flexible, and then there's some people who take a much more structured approach. Mm-hmm. In your home, what approach, and you don't have to put a label on it, but just in your own words, describe, like, what approach do you have generally to the homeschooling, to how much each of you are involved, and is that something that you've ever, considered changing? Has it already changed in the last few years that you've been educating your kids? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so I feel like I probably drive where we're going, but I'm always talking to him about everything. Like, what do you think about this? I'm thinking, okay, so if we do this here, we don't really need to do this part of this book. So I'm thinking I can just skim you by on this one. Well, so what do you think about that? And we have a really good conversation, because I like to have a lot of ideas. and he's reality. He manages to bring it back down. Like, you can't do all of these things in one day, but I want to. So we do generally, recently, Charlotte Mason's method, but we're not purists. I can't do anything. I have to play with it.
Gotta make it your own.
It's just not, I can't open and shut a curriculum and just go. I always fiddle with it. I always change it up. I just posted on Instagram how I have to make sure that I have a rotation of motion where my kids do not do hours of sit down time. They just don't. They don't learn. It's a big fight. It's bad. I don't want to do that. I don't want to sit down for hours at a time. And so we do Charlotte Mason. So I tell people that we do Charlotte Mason so they know kind of our philosophy right off the bat. But it's a very custom tailored curriculum. Everything is okay. So there we use oh gosh, what is it actually called? Because I always call it something else. The 100 Gentle Lessons by a Gentle Feast for their language arts. But we do it family style all together rather than by age, because they have different age levels. We do it all together, and I level it up when I need to and bring it down for those that need it leveled down. And so it's a very customized thing. What would you say?
So, well, I work from home, so I'm there to come in and out and, be interactive and talk with the kids and see how things are going. And so, but one thing we talked about early on is that I'm going to make the money and she's going to take care of the household, which includes education. And, in our eyes, those two things are equal. And in fact, in some ways, I feel like what she's doing is more valuable than what I'm doing. If I'm not making any money, then it's going to suck and we're not going to have a house and things are bad. But if she's not educating our kids, then that's a lifetime of detriment to them. So it's a huge thing. And there's, I would say there's been moments where she's been like, okay, you do the homeschooling, I'm going to go to work, because she was frustrated with it and trying to figure it out.
I would sit here and figure it out.
Yeah. So
sorry, we are having technical difficulties.
That at least gets you by a couple weeks in the position.
Yeah. Take a crash course, will be good. There's YouTube.
There you go. But yeah, so for me though, so it is kind of like we have defined those roles together, that you're this and I'm that, but obviously they mesh together and we work together on it. And my job is 8 to 5 and then it's done. Like I'm technically on call, but I'm almost never called in for anything. So it's like, so I try to, after work, have my time with the kids and do what needs to be done there. And I kind of think of myself as the principal a little bit, in that, like, even today, she was having trouble with our middle one, just didn't want to do it.
Just wasn't it
and today. So she called me and like, okay, you got to come in. You got to use your man voice a little bit and get him to, dad voice. And so I'm there for those kind of things. And, working with them through that. And, but because I'm working full time, I have to rely on her to find the curriculum and to figure out what we really should be doing and to, present it to me and say like, I've narrowed it down to these, let's figure out which one we like and talk through those and stuff. So, we have a lot of trust with each other. So I don't really have to feel like she's going to screw up our kids with what she picks, but I know she loves having input and like sanity checks and stuff like that. So I'm glad to be there for those things as well. So, and then as time progresses and they get older and are ready for things like computer classes, my plan is to actually teach them those things. And I mean, even if it's just once a week where I'm helping them do something, we have a 30-minute or an hour-long class, then, and even if they don't like it and they're not going to be programmers like I am, at least like, part of the well-rounding. So
Right.
Well,
That's a
and
skill.
you lead or even back up because we're in constant communication with each other. He's right here, so I can just walk in and say, okay, so this is what I'm doing. This is the conversation we just had. My oldest is getting baptized this weekend. He accepted Christ earlier this year, and so we've been like talking and talking and talking. Okay, so Finn talked about having this question today, and he's really stuck on this concept. And you at some point bring this back up, and so he'll get it in the morning from me, and the evening from him, and
Right.
I'll say it my way, and Nick will say it his way, and there's that two different inputs, the two different
Right.
both people in his life, both of his parents are saying this thing that must be important, and it's just that it's you get to add. He gets to bookend his day with Nick and myself talking
Sure.
about Christ and all of these principles, and we talk about what they did in school today. They come in and show you things. So it's awesome to have him here, physically here.
I love that, and I love the way that it almost is so natural for the two of you. You have to kind of stop and analyze it and think like, oh, how are we involved? Because it is so intertwined. And for a lot of families, I think, and I've asked this question in Facebook groups before, like, what role does dad have in homeschooling? And some people will answer and be like, he doesn't do anything. But even then, and when you kind of pull that thread a little bit, you're like, well, are you home with your kids full time? Is he providing a living so that you can be home with your kids full time? Well, yeah. Does he interact with kids when he is home and do stuff with them? Well, yeah. Does he talk to you about what you're teaching them or talk to them about what they learn? Well, yeah. And so it's like a lot of what, and again, I'm not trying to, say that a minimal amount of involvement is where any dad should stop. But even sometimes, like, the bare minimum things that a dad can do are really significant. Just credit isn't always given, or it's not always recognized. And I love, as you're highlighting, like, I think so often homeschool dads are kind of given this role of like, well, you're over there and we're doing the homeschool thing over here, because most often it's moms who are having the most contact time.
Right,
But
driving force.
right, but there are so many opportunities for it to be everybody involved, all hands on deck, because, people are going to get sick of hearing me say this on this show, but I don't care. Homeschooling is an extension of your parenting. And so if you are both involved in raising those kids, you better believe you're both going to be involved in educating those kids, whether you plan for it or not. That's how it's going to happen. So the more intentionality you can put into that, the more deliberate you can be, and the more you can be in communication with each other, the better off you'll be, because you're going to be involved in a way that has relevance and matters. And just like you were saying, Ashley, like, every concept can be reinforced, or the important ones can be reinforced, and that becomes a power rather than, oh, well, they kind of learned some stuff from me, I guess, maybe, I don't know, if you're not deliberate about it. So hats off to the two of you for having that awareness, for working together and being so unified with each other, so that then when it gets to the kids, it's not, well, dad said, well, mom said, and then it just all falls apart.
Well, that was one thing we actually talked about, was we would try to never really disagree with each other, at least in front of them. Like, we would, no matter what, even if, like, she said something, it was a disciplinary thing, like, oh, he lost this, and then he comes in, one of our kids comes and asks, and I'm thinking in my head, like, whoa, that was way too harsh, or, really shouldn't have done that. I'll still just be like, okay, well, that's what mom said, so that's what's going to happen. Like, having that unified front where, like, we're the same person, you're not going to get something out of one that you didn't get out of the other.
Yeah.
I think, it's part of what you were saying before, but also, like, one thing that's really been great for us, like, our kids kind of, every now and then they'll try it, like, they'll come in with just that 1% hope
Oh,
that
they're good, yeah.
one time dad will say I can have it when mom said I couldn't. But, like, when we give them an answer, they're not surprised. They just kind of walk off like, yeah, okay, that's what I expected.
Right.
So,
like, hey, it was worth a shot.
yeah.
And behind the scenes, when he and I get a moment alone, he may say, hey, I think that was probably a little too
Mhm.
harsh. You may ask for some forgiveness here and bring it back a little, but it has to come from you.
Right.
So, and
Sure.
then that's a give and take that we always try to present a unified front.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And on that note, before we end, I'm curious if you have any words of wisdom for the family who is new to all this. So here you are, you've each experienced homeschooling for yourselves. You've now been able to homeschool and experience it from the parents' perspective.
Mhm.
Um, by all means, I'm sure you'll still learn plenty more as your kids grow up, but you've had a lot of opportunity to absorb and experience and kind of think through what makes a successful approach to homeschooling. So, to the family who, maybe both parents are brand new to this or have never even considered it, but due to recent circumstances, we've seen there's been such a boom in homeschooling.
Right.
What advice do you have for those families who either are on the verge considering it, not quite sure, or maybe who've started it this year or started it recently and it still doesn't quite feel like something that they're comfortable with or that they have a handle on? What would you say to them?
So I can talk kind of more on the like mental side of it, and then you could talk both, but you could talk more about the like practical, like
Okay.
prepping side. But I think the number one thing that I had to learn, and even a little bit just as a parent, and like you said earlier, homeschooling is schooling. Education is an extension of parenting, so you can't
Mm-hmm.
really have one without the other. But I like when our first was born, I was constantly like, okay, is he the right size? Is he growing the right size? Is he overweight? Is he underweight? Is he too short, too tall? Should he be
Sure.
talking yet or not? All
Yeah.
of the thing, like I wanted metrics to compare to.
Yeah.
And like you can find those metrics in some places, but like they didn't help. Whenever I did find them, it was like, yeah, he's average, or he's a little under, or he's a little over. It didn't really change anything. And I thought it would. I was like, I
Right.
have to know. I have to know the answer to this because I have to know if my kid's screwed up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and I was trying to know that so that I could fix it. So
Yeah.
because I'm a guy, I'm a fixer. Like I want to. There's a problem, fix it.
Sure.
And so like, but over time, I realized like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to schooling and homeschooling in particular, like definitely don't compare yourself to a homeschooler. I mean, sorry, a public schooler. Don't compare yourself to your friends' kids who are in public school and like, oh well, Johnny can read now, but my son can't. Like
Mm-hmm.
it
Mhm.
doesn't matter. And like with the amount of research she does and things she looks into, like I think recently I asked like, hey, shouldn't our middle be a little better at reading now? I mean, it seems like other kids are. And she's like, no, actually, public schools have screwed kids up by forcing them to read too fast. I was like, whoa, okay. That's cool. Like, yeah, she's always ready. I don't ever stump her, ever. But yeah, so like, don't worry about the metrics. Like,
Yeah.
teach your kid in the story. Like, don't try to figure out. I mean, if it's a little, it could be a little helpful here and there to kind of have some kind of gauge of like where they may be deficient. But like the thing we say a lot is he's not going to be 21 and not know how to read. He's not going to be
Right.
21 and not know how to put two and two together. Like you get over, I tend to get overwhelmed by like where they are supposed to be versus where they are.
Sure.
And so just forgetting that stuff and saying, I'm going to do my best following what they are interested in and teaching them things and helping them figure things out and, throwing in a few things here and there. And the problems are obvious. Like the areas where like, okay, this is when it's going to need some work. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to look for it. It sticks
Right.
out. You're like, oh,
Right.
this is okay, cool. We'll work on this one. No big deal.
Yeah.
It's not like it's going to be hiding under the bush and you're like, oh, I never saw that coming, that he wouldn't, it's right out there. So
Yeah.
that's one big thing for me was just letting go of that. And then my other one would be to have fun with it. like to make education fun, to make it a game, to make it play. And like in a little bit of a devious way, it tricks them into learning. Like if they're having fun with it, they don't care that they're learning. They're not going to be like, what? You taught me something during that game? Oh, that's horrible. How could you do that?
I didn't consent to this.
Yeah. How could you do this to me? No, they're like, oh, cool. Yeah, no, I know that now. Like, or they just don't even notice and it doesn't matter. And you're like, yeah, but now you can do that thing. So you know, that's my other thing is like just trying. I mean, there's going to be times when you do have to just sit down and read the book or write out the math problem or do the schooling thing, but like make it as fun as you can, whatever that takes.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Good job.
What about you, Ashley?
So there's two ways to be new to homeschooling. I have a brand new baby and eventually they're going to have to start learning or you're coming out of public school. So I'm going to talk specifically about coming out of school first. I strongly suggest that you take a heavy dose of deschooling where you do no school at all. Nothing is required except that they do their chores. You don't go totally without a schedule, but you don't require education from them. And it's okay. They will catch up. They're very, very, very pliable at this point. Their brains will catch up. And that's 6 months even.
That's part of like what I'm saying. Like, what? They're going to be behind by a whole year? Oh my gosh, no, we definitely can't let that happen. Like, no, it's totally fine.
Totally fine. Yeah. They will catch up. It will be fine. Take time to get to know them. You can learn the five love languages. You can learn who they are in their personalities, learn what they hate, learn what they love. Write these things down as you're sitting there observing. Go and do things intentionally, like go to playgrounds, go to museums, go make that deschooling time active in that you are learning your kids. It's deschooling for them, but it is, cap on, it's time to learn your kids. And that will set you up for how to pick your curriculum. That will set you up for how to set up hey, do I need to have a rotation of motion? Or do I have a studious kid who wants to just get it all done in 3 hours and have the rest of the day? Or do I have a kid who has to do his math on the swing only? You will know these things by taking that scary season of deschooling. It's not scary once you get into the flow of it, but it can be daunting because it's like really not even a little bit of math. Nothing. Do nothing. Just learn your kids. Read books. Get used to the words. There's a whole vernacular now that wasn't around when we were homeschooling. Like I'm always asking people, well, what does this acronym mean though? In the homeschool community, even though I've grown up in it, it's blossomed into this huge worldwide community now, especially opened up through the internet. And so take some time to learn about it. But if you're that mom that, like us, you taught your kids to walk, you taught your kids their first letters, it's just a natural progression onward. It's just an extension of parenting. You taught them those letters, now you teach them the sounds that are associated, you put them together and make sounds, and then those sounds make words, and then now you're reading. And I wish it was that easy because reading is horrible to teach, but it's not my favorite thing. Reading is just drives me crazy, but it's just a natural forward progression. You're not going to suddenly have a teenager and you have to teach them how to dissect Shakespeare tomorrow. You're teaching them, okay, you have letter sounds and they sound like this. And we just did flashcards for our first year, read some books, played in Play-Doh with some intentional, hey, that's a square, that's a triangle, this is blue, this is green, just the building blocks. And you can look up guides if that is helpful to you, but if it stresses you out, don't. Don't. You can just say, okay, we did this yesterday. Our goal is over here. We have a roadmap because we want them to be successful adults in the world. And to us, success means, and you guys will fill in the blank.
Right.
That success is to you. It's custom tailored to your family. So success for us means a certain thing. And so I have a roadmap that I've broken down by 5 years, and then by year, and then by term. And I try to meet those. But again, I hold them loosely because my kids are going to learn on their own pace. And I'm not going to force something or pull them back.
There's plenty of time to learn it all.
Plenty
of time, you know.
You're raising lifelong learners, so
Sure.
that it doesn't stop at 18. It keeps going until the day they can't see or hear anymore.
Yeah.
And right. So then the thing that you're like, wow, we actually were deficient in that. We made a mistake in this area because they didn't really learn that as well. Well, but if they're lifelong learners, if they're good at that aspect of it, then they're going to figure that out when they need it.
Right.
They're
They
going to
can
go, oh,
circle
shoot,
back around.
this college class is kicking my butt because I didn't get this thing when I was younger. They won't be that bad because they'll figure it out.
Right.
We've never hired a handyman because we just can go learn the thing ourselves.
Right.
And that's the goal. That's the goal, is to say, we want you, the goal to learn is to know how to learn. And taking charge of that in your own adult lives looks like we don't hire plumbers, we don't hire auto mechanics. I was fixing my own car before I even met him, before I was dating guys even. Like we know we have a deficiency, we know how to rectify that.
Well, that's how my career went. Like I guarantee homeschool was a big part of this, but I am self-taught in development, and I know like 5 or 6 different programming languages now that I started off with one. Wow. And I started off with the internet and was like, okay, well, I know how to teach myself something, and I know how to figure out how to learn this better. Yeah. And then like, that's my career. That's the money that we get is from learning on my own. Yeah. And it's scary to go into a job interview and they give you the job and you're like, really? Do you realize I learned this off the internet?
In 3 months. He taught himself in 3 months.
I didn't go to college for this. I have a degree, but it's not in this, and you're really gonna let me do this? Okay. But like it works because and now I feel like there's nothing I can't do. Like I mean that like nothing as in the actual meaning of nothing. Like if I wanted to paint like Rembrandt, I'm a terrible artist, but I could spend enough time at it. I could teach myself to paint that way if I really, really had a passion for it. And so that's where you want your kids to be. And so just start that way. Like, let's just learn how to learn well. Let's learn how to enjoy this and have fun with it. And I love programming and I love learning programming. And every time there's something that comes up, I'm like, oh, I got to learn a new language. All right, let's do this. It's going to be great. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
That's so true, and you know what you're highlighting is really that growth mindset of that concept of my mind and my abilities are not fixed and finite, they are pliable and adaptable, and anything I come across, if I put in the effort and the time, I can meet that demand. Ashley, you had mentioned you were going to talk to the family who was pulling out of public school. And I think you covered that really well. Did you say everything you wanted to say about, you know, the family who, I just had a baby and I need to figure out what I'm going to do?
You have time. You have a lot more time. We didn't start formally educating our eldest until he turned 7 this last year. Right. And it doesn't look like formal public school education. Right. He should be in first. I love the question, what grade is he in? He should be in like 1st or 2nd grade. Sure. He's kind of a blend of both right now, depending on what subject he's in. But, you know, he's totally lost track of what I was just saying. Anyway, so.
Well, that you have time, that you're not pressured to say,
that's what I was saying.
Have to, yeah.
There's no have to, that you have to show up every day. You do have to be consistent. And that might be a harder education than you might expect. It definitely is for me. It's still something I tackle. But you have all the time. Find those other moms that you can come build your village, build your community group, build your co-op, whatever it looks like for you. But you have to be proactive. You can't can't fall into your lap.
Yeah, and then I think a final thing I would say is this is true in all of life, but community is a big deal. Yeah. You are not in it alone. You don't have to be in it alone, and you shouldn't be in it alone. And I know this is what happened to us as our kids progress in like something like math that we're both fairly bad at. We will have to have somebody teach them. Like if they're, you know, both of our boys have expressed interest in engineering type things. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to get way into that math way faster and further than either of us can handle.
Sure.
And we're not worried about it at all,
No.
even a little bit, because we know that there's tons of resources out there and there's people who are good at math who
so
can
much
teach
now.
it. And I took a science class with a family friend who taught like 4 or 5 other kids because she had a degree in biology and she was happy to teach biology to the kids, basically the kids in the neighborhood who were doing homeschooling. And
Right.
so don't like, not just like, don't, you know, there is community out here, like, yes, but also I'm saying get into it. Don't avoid it. Don't stay away from community. Don't think, well, I'm not good enough or I don't fit in or I don't know enough or whatever. Like, take advantage of that gigantic resource that is available. And even if it's just like, hey, I met somebody, you know, my husband's coworker's wife is homeschooling her kids, or I met somebody at church or at the supermarket, like wherever
Sure.
it is, like you can find that. It doesn't have to be some special organization for homeschooling, but find those people who are doing the same thing you are. And it's huge. Like that's her Instagram thing, is not just her trying to give back to that community and help people, but also like she gets tons of stuff from it, learns tons of things from it. So
Oh yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And that's actually a beautiful segue. Before we end, I'd like to talk a little bit real quick about your Instagram. I always love to ask people about their handle because there seems to always be a different meaning than what I take from it. So please let us know what your handle is so people can follow you, if there is any story or meaning behind it, and then tell us a little bit about, you know, if people are not familiar with it, what they can find there, and anything else that you want to share or any other promotions you have going.
Okay, so I'm at This Joy-Filled House, and it's really a personal reminder to me to every day choose joy, because joy isn't just a fleeting feeling, that's happiness. Joy is something that you choose despite your circumstances. It may be happy, but it may just be mediocre. And I feel like with being a stay-at-home mom, being a stay-at-home wife, being at home all day, every day, you come to this strange place called Groundhog Day. It's the same every day, and it can get dull, and that's been the hardest thing to tackle. Is there's some finite changes here. There's little changes throughout the day. Your battle may look a little different every day, but in a lot of ways, it's the same thing. We're having the same battle with the same kids. We're having the same struggle with this curriculum. It's the same curriculum every day. The sameness wears harder than necessarily the peaks of hard times or the happy times. And so choosing joy-filledness is a intentional mindset that I try to bring into everything that I do, especially in my house. Because as a mom, like it or not, you set the tone for the emotions in your house.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so specifically on that account, tell us a little bit about what folks will find. I mean, that's a great umbrella. That almost says it all right there. But are you mostly homeschool based? Is it homeschool? I mean, I know, but you know, I don't want to I don't want to answer it for you.
I would say I'm mostly homeschool based, since that captivates my mind the most. I generally share whatever the Lord's leading me to share, or whatever my community is struggling with. Sometimes I share, every year I share like 2 weeks worth of, here's everything we've picked out. I'm laying out exactly what we're doing. I say why. I also am totally off the cuff, and I will just post random harebrained stories all the time of just, this is a day in the life. Welcome, join us on our crazy adventures. And there's gardening sprinkled in there, cooking sometimes, but it's mostly homeschool, and mostly very specific to how we homeschool, because I know that it is very scary taking the plunge to homeschool, and I'm more than happy to be an open book to ask me anything and I will do I will go and research it for you. I am happy to help, because this is not something that any person should tackle by themselves. And I don't want anyone to ever feel like they have to do that by themselves. And so I am here as a lighthouse on the hill to help you. I'm going to come alongside you.
And I would say one thing I think is really cool about what she posts is it is very open and honest. And like, I feel like Instagram's kind of famous for the opposite. Like, let's make myself look amazing and hide everything and like, you know, clean everything up. But she just gotta post a picture. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, I wouldn't have posted that. Like that's personal. But then I'm like, no, wait, that's pretty cool. Like I appreciate that she doesn't mind letting the world see her without makeup on, or, you know, or in the struggle with a kid or something, because I guarantee you there's people seeing that and going, oh, I'm not alone. Wow, my kid does it too. That's so cool to see that, you know, that there's struggles out there. So.
And I have to say, that's my favorite thing about your account, is how honest and straightforward it is. And you know, anybody listening to this interview, if you've appreciated the candor and the transparency of this conversation, that's exactly what you'll find on that account. So I highly encourage everybody to follow. Are there any other, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. Are there any other last things that you wanted to share, or things that you didn't get a chance to say that you want to say before we end off?
I think we about covered it. I mean, we talked about the neurodivergent thing, and I'm happy to answer anything that if I missed anything later on, but
great.
Yeah, we did a good job.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for your time, for your example, and again, I think that the two of you being so transparent and so honest about your experiences has tremendous power, because there are a lot of parents of kids who are neurodivergent who, you know, maybe aren't sure what's best for them or aren't sure how to support them. And I see so much opportunity in homeschooling specifically for those families. For every family, there's something, but especially for those families, because of how individualized it is. You know, we hear so much about 504 plans or IEPs, individualized education plans for students, and really the level of individualization is so minimal because it still is within this structure that can only be changed so much. But when you take a child out of that and you put them in a homeschool setting, that individualization opens up to anything that child needs. You're able to give it to them. And so thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for your example. And above all, thank you for doing it with such great optimism and charm and charisma. You guys make homeschooling look and sound great, and that's what we're after. We want people to see how great it is. So thank you for that. That was Nick and Ashley Taylor, neurodivergent students turned neurodivergent parents, and tireless champions of the unique needs and exceptional abilities of each member of their family. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to give our podcast a positive rating and review, and share it with the other parents and educators in your life. If you want to take the guesswork out of homeschooling while saving yourself time and money, head over to homeschooledvantage.com and check out our free resources, and consider becoming a member to unlock your access to the most comprehensive training available for homeschool parents. You can join the conversation by connecting with me on Twitter and Instagram at Todd K. Michael, Facebook and YouTube Homeschool Edvantage, and at homeschooledvantage.com. That's homeschooledvantage with an E.com. Links to all in the show notes. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody. And if it wasn't for all of you, if it wasn't for all of you,